He had been in a terrible car crash. 5 years ago, they laid him to rest. They wept for him, grieved deeply, and eventually moved forward. But on the very day when his wife was about to marry his closest friend, he appeared, not as a spirit, nor just a memory, but as a man who had never truly left this world. Along with him, buried secrets from the ashes began to surface. This is a tale of faith, deception, and a love that refused to be forgotten. The Ijele Sanctuary glowed with solemn beauty. Ivory roses lined every row. Golden lanterns flickered softly near the altar, and gentle melodies from the organ rose like whispers from the heavens. Ifunanya stood before the priest, trembling slightly, her wedding veil hiding her face. Today was her wedding day once again. Her fingers gripped the bouquet tightly as the priest's voice echoed through the hall. If anyone here knows a reason why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, speak now or forever hold your peace. Silence filled the entire sanctuary. Ifunanya blinked back tears. Her heart ached with a tangled mix of sorrow and hope. The crowd turned to look for anyone who might stand, but no one did. Just as the priest was about to continue, the massive wooden doors burst open. With a sharp bang, every eye turned immediately. A tall figure, dressed head to toe in black, stood in the entrance. His face was thin, serious, yet somehow familiar. A strange silence fell over the room. The organ's music stopped. Some people squinted, others gasped. "Is that?" murmured a woman. "It can't be." Another cried out, "Mercy, Lord." The man took slow, deliberate steps down the aisle, his leather shoes clicking on the polished stone floor. He stopped halfway, locking eyes with the bride, then spoke in a low, commanding voice. "Cancel this wedding now, or live with regret for the rest of your days." Gasps echoed through the hall like thunder. Ifunanya froze. "No, no, no," she whispered, lips trembling. "It can't be. Is that Malamo?" Someone asked, standing up for a better look. "I thought he was dead." An elderly woman screamed, clutching her purse and rushing out, her heels clicking wildly. Several others hurried after her, stumbling in their haste. Suleiman's mother gasped, clutching her chest, then sank back into her seat. The choir murmured prayers softly, but Malamo said nothing more. He just stood, eyes sharp, his face unreadable. Suleiman stepped forward protectively, placing himself between Malamo and Ifunanya. "Who are you? What kind of cruel joke is this, security?" "Number 1 answered." Malamo didn't move or blink, standing like a man returned from the grave with unfinished business. Ifunanya's breath quickened, the bouquet slipped from her fingers. Her legs gave out beneath her. She collapsed to the floor, unconscious. Screams erupted. "Call an ambulance, she's fainted." The crowd began to scatter. The sanctuary emptied quickly, but Malamo stayed, watching Ifunanya's still form without a flicker of emotion, just presence. The room buzzed with chaos. Ifunanya lay on the cold floor as her maid of honor knelt beside her, near tears, trying to wake her. Outside, whispers and curious onlookers gathered by the doors. Inside, the air was thick with fear and confusion. Malamo remained motionless, eyes fixed on the bride, unmoving since his chilling warning. "Cancel this wedding now, or live with regret for the rest of your days." The priest leaned against the altar, shaken. This is spiritual." He murmured, "What kind of spirit is this?" Suleiman, fists clenched, strode toward the silent man. "I don't know who you are or what you want, but this ends now." He stopped just inches from Malamo, studying his face. The resemblance was too strong. Sharp jawline, the scar above his left eyebrow, the confident stance. No impersonation. This was Malamo, Ifunanya's husband, believed dead. Suleiman stepped back, stunned. "But you died. We all saw the crash. And the charred car, and we all laid you to rest." Still, Malamo said nothing. Slowly, he turned his head, eyes scanning the whole room. A small child began to cry. Even the priest took a step back behind the altar, gripping his rosary like a lifeline. From outside, faint sirens echoed. Someone had called for help. Ifunanya stirred. Her fingers twitched. Then, with a soft groan, she sat up slowly, helped by her maid of honor and 2 other women. Her eyes met Malamo's again. She blinked twice as tears sprang to her eyes. "No, we buried you, Malamo," she said shakily, voice breaking. "I cried for you. I stopped living after you were gone." "You were gone." Still he said nothing, no explanation. Only that same haunting stare. Ifunanya rose unsteadily, brushing away the hands that helped her. "You can't just walk in here and rip my life apart again," she said, trembling. "What are you? A ghost? A memory? What do you want from me?" Malamo finally moved, stepping forward just once. Members of the congregation gasped and backed away as if he were some spirit. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out something small. Gently, he placed it on the first pew, then turned and walked out of the sanctuary. No words, no explanation, just silence and fading footsteps. Ifunanya stared at the object he left behind. Her heart skipped a beat. It was a pendant, her pendant, the one she had given Malomo on their 3rd wedding anniversary. It bore their faces carved in delicate detail. She had it custom-made. The edges of the pendant were singed slightly, proof it had been through the fire where Malamo's body was found. Ifunanya's knees weakened again. She could neither speak nor cry. The sanctuary remained chaotic long after Malamo left. Guests whispered in small groups, glancing nervously toward the doors, as if expecting him to return. Ifunanya sat motionless, staring at the pendant. Slowly, she reached out and picked it up. The priest tried to calm everyone, but his voice was shaky. "My children, today's ceremony cannot continue. We need clarity." He gently closed his Bible and walked away from the altar. Ifunanya sat silently, eyes vacant. The pendant was clenched tightly in her palm. Her breathing was shallow. Suleiman sat beside her, stiff and unsettled. His jaw twitched, but he tried to sound calm. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly. Ifunanya didn't answer. He looked at her again. "It's probably someone playing a cruel trick, a look-alike. You know, people can go to great lengths these days for attention." Slowly, Ifunanya turned her face toward him, voice barely a whisper. "It was him, Suleiman. I would know him anywhere. That man was my husband." That night, the story spread across social media. The bride's presumed dead husband crashing her wedding after 5 years. Photos of Malumo's dramatic entrance went viral. Some claimed he was a ghost. Others said he faked his death. Some swore it was a desperate ex seeking attention. But the only person who had seen him closely knew the truth. It was Malamo. After the wedding chaos, Ifunanya returned home. The next morning, she sat on her bed in silence. Suleiman had called twice, but she didn't answer. Instead, she stared at the small pendant Malamo had left behind, tears streaming down her cheeks. Her fingers trembled as she opened the clasp. Inside was a tiny, tightly folded piece of paper. She unfolded it carefully. A single line was written in Malamo's handwriting. "Not everyone who dies stays dead." Her heart dropped. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Where are you, Malamo?" That evening, Ifunanya met with her longtime friend and lawyer, Ugochi. She laid out everything she had seen and felt. "I need help," Ifunanya said firmly. "I want to find him. I have to know what happened, where he's been, and why he warned me." Ugochi stared at her, disbelief clear in her eyes. "Ifunanya, are you talking about the same Malamo whose burial we both attended? The one you laid to rest?" "That man was Malamo," Ifunanya replied calmly. She took out the note from the pendant. Ugochi read it carefully, then nodded. Slowly, I know someone who does quiet investigations, discreet, off the record. Let me make a call. She called a private investigator. Ifunanya gave him the details, and he began his work. 3 days later, Ifunanya was curled up in her room. Ifunanya sat on the edge of her bed when her phone buzzed. It was her father calling. She hesitated before answering. "Daddy Ifunanya." Chief Amarty's deep voice came through, firm, but not kind. "I need you to come to the house tonight. Bring Suleiman with you." She sat up, startled. "Why?" "We need to talk, you, him, and his parents," he replied sharply. Ifunanya's heart sank. "Daddy." "No excuses, Ifunanya. This is important." He ended the call. Later that evening, Ifunanya and Suleiman arrived at her father's mansion. Suleiman's parents were already seated in the parlor. Chief Amarty stood by the fireplace, arms crossed, his face unreadable. Ifunanya's mother sat quietly next to Suleiman's mother, both whispering with knitted brows. The atmosphere was tense. "Let's not waste time," Chief Amarty began, stepping forward. "This wedding, this entire situation, has brought shame and confusion to our families. I want the truth." Suleiman cleared his throat, shifting nervously. "Sir, I believe the man who appeared at the church is not Malamo." At that moment, there was a knock at the door. Everyone turned. The housekeeper peeked in, a strange look on his face. "Sir, there's someone here to see you." "Tell them to come back later," Chief Amarty said. But it was too late. The doors swung open, and Malamo stepped inside. Gasps filled the room. Everyone was terrified. Malamo wore a dark shirt, clean jeans, and a calm expression. Right behind him walked an older man, his skin weathered, dressed in worn traditional clothes, holding a walking stick. Silence fell. The ceiling fan hummed above them. Malamo stopped in the center of the room, his gaze sweeping over every face. Then he spoke clearly and confidently. "Please don't be afraid," he said. "I'm not a ghost. I am Malamo Anosu, the man you all thought was buried." Shock spread through the room. "I know this is confusing," Malamo continued, "but I am alive and I thank God for it." He turned slightly, gesturing to the man behind him. "This man, this hunter, is why I stand here today. He saved me from that crash 5 years ago." Ifunanya's eyes watered. Her lip trembled as she slowly sat down. Suleiman shifted again in his seat, fingers fidgeting with his watch strap. The hunter stepped forward slowly. His eyes were calm, his voice low but steady. "Good evening to you all," he began. "I know many of you wonder what really happened. I will tell you." He looked around the room, briefly resting his gaze on Ifunanya, then on Chief Amarty. "But before I begin, let me say this. Everything you thought you knew about that crash was false. The day it happened, I was there. I had been hunting in the forest. I was in good spirits that day. It was late, maybe close to 6 in the evening. The bush path was quiet, and the weather calm. I was just about to turn onto the narrow footpath leading to my village when I heard tires screeching loudly against the road. Then came the crash, the sound of metal twisting and breaking like dry branches. My heart leaped. I dropped everything and ran toward the highway. When I reached the roadside, I saw a black SUV had veered off the road and crashed deep into the slope. The bonnet was smoking. One tire was spinning in the air. I didn't hesitate. I slid down the slope, grabbed a branch, and made my way toward the wreck. There was the smell of fuel in the air. Time was running out, and I had to move fast. I tried the back door, but it was jammed. So I climbed over the trunk and yanked open the driver's side door. That's when I saw him badly. Injured but still breathing, just barely. I didn't know who he was, but I knew I had to act quickly. I used my wrapper to steady his head and dragged him out from beneath the wheel, pulling him through the broken door. I dragged him inch by inch up the slope and laid him beneath a tree by the road. Then I ran back down toward the car. I remembered there was someone else, a passenger. I saw a figure slumped to the side, motionless. But just before I reached the car, boom, it exploded. Flames shot up like a dragon's breath. I fell backward, ears ringing. For minutes, the fire lit up the entire roadside. I couldn't save the second man. That broke me. When I gathered myself, I looked back at the man I had rescued. When he was unconscious, I carried him to my ... We live far from everything. No hospital, no phones. Just the village and its quiet rhythms. I have a small hut by the stream where my wife boiled herbs every day, and I wrapped his ribs with palm fronds and soaked cloth. For nearly a week, he did not wake. When he finally opened his eyes, the only thing he remembered was his name. Nothing else. I asked him about his family, but he just stared silently. That's when I realized he had lost everything. He had lost his memory. After seeing that, I started calling him my son, so he would feel someone still cared. At first he barely spoke, but every morning when the rooster crowed, he would sit up and stare out the window as if waiting for something that would never come. I boiled herbs for him each day, rubbed shea butter on his wounds, and fed him bitter yam porridge when he was too weak to chew. Weeks passed. Slowly he healed. When he could stand, he begged me to take him outside. He was tired of being trapped inside. So I took him hunting. Every morning we walked into the bush. I taught him how to set traps, how to tell the footprints of bush rabbits from those of goats missing from the village. He listened carefully, worked hard, eager to learn. Not once did he complain. Soon we laughed together, shared roasted antelope by the fire, sat by the stream telling stories under the moonlight. He never asked about who he was again. This went on for over 4 years. I was grateful to finally have a son, my only son, since my own child disappeared many years ago. Then one day something changed. We were returning from a hunt, carrying a good catch of grass cutters. I decided to take the long path, the one that curved around the hill and led to the expressway where his crash had happened. I didn't expect anything, but as we neared the road, he stopped suddenly, like a spirit brushing past him. He froze, eyes locked on a spot by the roadside, just beyond the slope. He didn't move. I called his name, but he didn't answer. Slowly, he walked down to the exact place where I had found him that night. Everything had been cleared, no burnt car, no police tape, just dust and dry grass. But something was calling him. He knelt and brushed the earth with his palm. Then, he saw it, a small silver object half buried in the soil. He picked it up. It was a pendant, burnt around the edges but still intact. He opened it and stared deep, as if his soul recognized it before his mind could. His hands began to shake. His breathing changed. He whispered, almost like a prayer. "This is mine. This is me and my story." Then silence. That was the first crack, the first memory. Back at the hut, he didn't speak for hours. He sat outside, staring at the pendant, as if it held the key to another life. I didn't disturb him, I just watched. As days passed, something inside him began to change. He woke in the middle of the night, breathing hard, sweating, whispering names. Sometimes he stood outside at dawn, looking toward the horizon, as if waiting for someone to come walking from the trees. One evening, while roasting yams by the fire, he looked at me and sighed. I remember everything. My chest tightened. That night, he told me everything. He was traveling to Asaba. After about an hour's drive, he saw a man stranded by the roadside, waving frantically. Malamo stopped and offered him a lift. The man seemed harmless, grateful. He noticed Malamo's wristwatch and admired it, so Malamo gave it to him as a gift. The man wore it immediately and thanked him. They talked in the car for a while, before the brakes suddenly failed completely. He remembered pressing the pedal over and over, but the car didn't slow until the crash. That night, He cried for the first time since I found him, like a man who lost more than just his memory. He had lost time. I held his shoulder and told him he was lucky. The land of the dead had spit him back out. The next morning, I gave him every penny I had. It was enough to get into the city. He didn't want to take it, but I told him, "Go, your life is calling. Don't." He hugged me tightly, like a son to his father. Then he left, and I never saw him again until 3 days ago, when he came back to the village and asked me to come here with him. The hunter finished his story. Ifunanya was crying heavily, while others looked shocked. Malamo bowed in thanks to the hunter, then turned to face them all. He cleared his throat and began to speak. When I returned to the city, it felt like stepping into a different lifetime. The buildings were taller, the streets busier, faces unfamiliar. So much had changed. It had been nearly 5 years, but to me, it felt like I had closed my eyes for just one day. I didn't go straight home. I wasn't even sure if it was still mine. Instead, I wandered the streets, wanting to feel the city deep in my bones. Again, after some time, hunger hit me. I entered a small, quiet restaurant. There were only a few customers. I sat at the back near the window and ordered a simple plate of jollof rice. As I ate, I overheard 2 men laughing and talking, 2 tables away. At first, I wasn't paying attention until I heard a name that made blood freeze. Ifunanya. I looked up. They were holding something between them, a card. I squinted and saw her smiling face on glossy paper. Next to hers was the name Suleiman. They were talking about her wedding to him. I wiped my hands, stood up slowly, and walked toward them. Careful, calm. "Excuse me," I said. "May I see that invitation?" The younger man looked up. "Do you know them?" I smiled. "I used to. They handed it to me." There it was. Ifunanya, my wife, getting married to Suleiman, my closest friend, the man I trusted with my home, my secrets, my life. I felt dizzy but thanked them politely and returned the card. My appetite vanished instantly. As I walked out of the restaurant, memories flooded back. The day before my trip, Suleiman was in my house. Ifunanya was away on business but knew I was traveling. I told Suleiman I needed to service my car, and he offered to help. He took my car for servicing, and when he returned, I saw him bent over the bonnet, working on something. At the time, I thought he was helping. I even thanked him. But now, 5 years later, he was about to marry my wife. I began to connect the dots. My brakes were tampered with. The failure was too sudden. Only Suleiman and his so-called mechanic touched my car before I traveled. I've been around for over a month now. I haven't called anyone. I haven't shown myself. I've taken odd jobs here and there to raise money to survive. I wasn't sure if I was ready to face Ifunanya. I didn't know if I had the strength to look Suleiman in the eye. But I decided this wedding would not happen, not until the truth was revealed. Malamo's voice trembled with emotion as he concluded. Still crying, Ifunanya stood and walked over to Suleiman, slapping him hard. "Start talking," she yelled. "You told me you were out of town when Malumo was traveling. Now he says you were with him the day before he left. What do you know about the failed brakes?" Suleiman stared at Ifunanya. "Well, it was all Malamo's fault," he began slowly, his voice dripping with lies. Dear viewers, trust is the invisible thread that binds us to those we love. It is the quiet belief that the hands we welcome close to our hearts will never be the same hands that betray us. But sometimes, trust is shattered by those we least expect. Sometimes, the very people we protect sharpen the knives behind our backs. Watch out for part 2, where Suleiman finally reveals what he did to Malamo's car, and why.